The 2025 World Superbike Championship gets underway down under. Welcome to Australia and Phillip Island. After a dramatic 2024 dominated by Toprak, are we going to see the same in 2025? Let's cross over and get ready for first practice.
The good news for everyone is they know where they stand right from the get-go. We've had a two-day test here at the start of the week. Everyone's primed and ready to go, and they're just waiting for the track to be cleaned and ready after an instant in the Supersport session.
Yeah, a little bit of a delay as a result of an oil spill in that preceding session, so we don't yet have a pit lane opening time, but we will get underway as soon as possible. Gives us an opportunity to go through the grid in the meanwhile as the 2025 season gets underway in earnest. As we've said, those 4 sessions spread over 2 days at the start of this week, so we do have a clear idea of the pecking order at this venue, and it's a season of stability. Last year, of course, we had plenty of changes up and down the grid. We had 2 of our last 3 world champions moving teams to try and hunt down the then reigning title holder Alvaro Bautista, and it was one of them, Toprak Razgatlioglu, who delivered, giving BMW their first title. Memorable season for BMW and for Toprak with those 13 consecutive victories, but the task is going to be a little bit more difficult at the start of this season. He's already carrying an injury, had a big crash in testing as well, and the BMW have lost a couple of their perks that they had last season as a result of super concessions also.
Yeah, losing some chassis upgrades with their super concessions now that they've got a newly homologated bike for the 2025 season. Toprak, he's had a tough winter. We've ended up in the January test. Jerez and Portimao, he was only able to do a half day's running because of right index finger fracture. And for Razgatlioglu, coming here to Phillip Island, he needed to get miles under his belt. On his second flying lap, he had a big high side at turn 6. But he said that I'm going to be in the mix all the way through this weekend. This is the crash from the Monday test.
Yeah, the CCTV images, and Toprak Razgatlioglu just being launched off the bike. The problem is he's already carrying that injury, wearing a special glove and so on. It is something that clearly is going to have an impact, but perhaps even more so the fact that he hasn't been able to do long runs, that he has been restricted in his running during the winter thus far.
Yeah, and for Toprak, obviously, it's tough to be able to get the plan ready for that, but as you can see, he's as relaxed as ever coming into this weekend and into the season.
I think so. Toprak Razgatlioglu
wants to see it again.
Yeah, after that incident, but just going back to last season, phenomenal campaign for him, 2 missed rounds, and yet he still manages to win by a 43-point margin. That was courtesy of those victories strung together from race 2 in Assen in April all the way to the end of August, so quite phenomenal. Anything like that kind of pace, and he's going to be very, very difficult to beat.
Yeah, and it's one of those situations around here, pace is key, and it's about managing that consistency. We know we're going to have pit stops through the course of this weekend's races, so everyone knows that outright speed is critical. Managing it for those 10 laps shouldn't be too much of an issue for the riders, and then being able just to keep that speed right to the end.
Have now been given a time for pit lane to open. It is at 11:40 local time, so as you can see at the top of your screen there, just over 5 minutes until we do get underway with the session, so thankfully not too much of a delay, albeit that the riders are a little bit up and down the pit lane at the moment, trying to work out and ascertain what the conditions and the current situation is out there. But I can tell you, just over 5 minutes, and then we'll be getting underway with free practice 1. This is the man who finished second to Toprak Razgatlioglu in the championship last year, a title contender right to the last, in fact, as a result of those 2 non-scoring rounds for Razgatlioglu. Nicolo Bulliger started the season in sensational fashion with pole position and a race 1 win on his debut here in Phillip Island a year ago. But I think the best moment of his season has got to be his performance at the final 2 rounds. Really came of age, took the fight to Toprak Razgatlioglu in the Superpole race in Estoril. What a memorable race finish that was. And then the 2 victories at the start of the weekend in Jerez. We could, if we start as we finished the end of last season, have a really good battle between those 2, Razgatlioglu and Bulliger, and throw a third real factor into the mix as well. Alvaro Bautista has won 2 world championships of the last 3. Of course, the title taken away from him last year. Bautista's got to find something, because last season very few race victories. The podiums weren't as regular as in the past. There were too many crashes. He had the most crashes of anyone in recorded sessions during the season. Bautista was never quite at ease on the bike, was he, with the new weight regulations and so on?
Yeah, for Alvaro it was a real struggle last season. From Most onwards, he felt a lot more comfortable with the bike. I think one of the big things for Ducati was trying to find that base setting with the changes to the regulations for him last year. The weight penalty, it did add a lot for making it a bit more difficult for Bautista, but the biggest thing was he wasn't fit for much of the season after a pretty bad winter that had bad injuries. But for him now, the key is he's got to hit the ground running. Bulega is your clear Ducati team leader, and it's up to Alvaro Bautista to roll back the years and try and prove that he's still that title contender. But as it is right now, you definitely have that focus on Nicola Bulega.
Big new project in World SBK this season. The actual rider lineups for the 6 official teams of last year have not changed, but it is a brand new bike for what was the Kawasaki Racing Team. It's now BeMotor by Kawasaki Racing Team, a partnership there to bring a famous name back into the series.
Yeah, it's great. We've got another manufacturer on the grid. They're using the Kawasaki engine, and gives you a good comparison between the Kawasaki chassis and the BeMotor chassis. And the Pichetti team, now the Kawasaki World Superbike team, they're very motivated to show what they can do with Garrett Gerloff. And for the Provec Racing team running the BeMotor, they've got a new project to get their teeth into. Certainly for Axel Bassani, we can see here, it's been exciting to jump onto the bike and be able to see some progress. For his crew chief, Marcel Dunker, on the right-hand side of the shot, it's a new project and it's a real opportunity for him to prove his worth as well. And this pair are incredibly motivated to hit the ground running.
Yes, Alex Lowe's and Axel Bassani, who'll be riding that bike. For Bassani, it's probably quite a refreshing reset, because there was a big gap between him and Alex Lowe's through the course of last season. He got what he wanted, he got the factory ride, but now he's got to deliver on the potential he certainly and undoubtedly showed with Moto Corsa. But it's a rather different situation for him and for Alex Lowe's this season. As you can see, worst possible start to this campaign for Jonathan Rea, his second season on Yamaha machinery. And unfortunately, he suffered a bad injury in testing and will be out certainly for this round and quite possibly for the start of European season as well, with that left foot injury. Got to wait for the swelling to go down, an operation to be undertaken. So the worst possible situation as far as Jonathan Rea and Yamaha are concerned. They lose their star man.
Yeah, Johnny's just after landing back home in Northern Ireland, and this is a replay of the crash, and you can see the energy for the bike through the Southern Loop. Johnny was just very unlucky with that, because the bike came down and just hit into his foot and caused those fractures. But as he said as well, he was lucky that the bike didn't land a little bit further up his body as well, because then it could have been really serious injuries. But he's flown home. We'll await news on surgery on the fractures. We'll wait and see when he's back on the bike. But certainly for Yamaha, they have to plan ahead. We've got 2 days of testing in Portimao in a few weeks' time. Then we've got the Portimao race. Then we've got the Assen race. They need to plan who's going to be on that bike for those 2 rounds.
Yeah, no good fortune at all at the moment, is there, for Jonathan Rea? Had a crash here in Phillip Island last season. A few more incidents than he would have liked to in his first season with Yamaha, and trying to bounce back after what can only be described as his worst ever season, frankly, in World SBK, down in 13th in the championship. The expectation was that he would hit the ground running and be much closer to the front this year, but obviously he's going to be on the back foot when he finally does return. Big news in terms of rider lineup is with the independent teams. Further back down the grid, Scott Redding, who has been with Bonovo for a little stretch already, but on BMW machinery this year. They've switched to Ducati, and optimism is high that Redding will be brought back into the mix now, because he did perform so well as a factory Ducati rider at the start of his World SBK career. Title rival, remember, to Jonathan Rea. And we'll see how Scott Redding gets on over the course of this weekend. But it would be really good to see Redding back towards the front, and just add to the calibre of riders that we've got battling on Ducatis.
Yeah, exactly. It's exciting to see Scott on that bike. He's unbelievably motivated for this season, and that's great to see, considering that at times during his tenure with BMW you could see that motivation waning. And for him now, he spent the winter, everyone's been able to see on Instagram the amount of running that he's been doing, but he's lost a lot of weight and he's got himself down to, I think it's around 75 kilos, so he's down 5 kilos in all of his gear. So big difference for Redding, and that has to have an impact for him But the biggest thing is you're out there on the Ducati, and we know that he can make that bike work.
Main story about tyres in Phillip Island this weekend is the fact that we're going to have pit stop races again. As per last season, this is the most challenging circuit on the calendar as far as tyres are concerned.
Last season we had a brand new track surface here. It was very abrasive, it was very green, so riders were really going through their tyres. So that's why we've got the pit stop races for this weekend, just to make sure we don't have any issues like that. What's been interesting during the tests has been that no one's really suffered bad tyre wear issues, but the track temperature's been a lot lower than it was last year, and it's a lot lower than it will be tomorrow in all likelihood as well, when we could be well over 50 degrees track temperature. So we'll wait and see how everyone reacts during the course of the weekend, but the pit stop races basically mean everyone's going to have to make sure that they're efficient in the pit lane, and it throws another variable into the mix.
As I touched on already, super lineup of Ducati independent teams this season. Barney Ducati had their first race victories last season. Of course, Nicola Spinelli coming up with a race win, and then Danilo Petrucci with a super performance, 3 race victories in the Cremona weekend. He's achieved what he wanted to in the championship, which is to get that first win on the board and add another series to the many in which he has been a winner. Petrucci's target now to step up further in the championship and try and take a medal ranking. That was his target established this season. He was finished 5th overall last year and top independent rider. Have his work cut out with Andrea Iannone also trying to make progress. The problem for Iannone in his first season in World SBK was inconsistency, so he's got to get some more consistent performances on the board in Superpole and then deliver those important race finishes as well.
Yeah, exactly, and the key is consistency in this championship because everyone is so good. The whole grid is completely stacked now, and you need to perform day in, day out, and every race matters. And one of those situations for a lot of those riders on independent machines, particularly the Ducatis, we know that they can be very strong, we know they can get good results. And for Petrucci, for Iannone, for all of the riders on that bike, they know that the pressure's on because it is the best bike on the grid. Whether or not Toprak was able to win the championship last year, that's the Toprak factor. The Ducati is the bike that everyone wants to ride, and it's going to be really interesting to see what step everyone makes. What's Scott Redding going to do jumping onto that bike? Is he going to be able to find that little bit that he's been missing over the last few years and get that confidence back and be able to run right at the front again? And the same can be said for Iannone on a consistent basis. Petrucci's second half of last year showed what he's capable of. He needs to do that for the full season.
Remy Gardner, home favourite here, of course, so all eyes on him this weekend. The Australian managed to get his first podium last season, race 2 in Assen. Was very close, actually, in the first 2 races of the weekend as well. Brilliant weekend for him, the Dutch round. But Yamaha in the doldrums, rather, last season. Andrea Locatelli dropping places in the championship down to 7th. He was their best finisher in the series overall. Gardner in 10th, Jonathan Ray, we've already said, finishing down in 13th. So a lot of work for Yamaha to do over the course of this season.
Yeah, and certainly Yamaha, when you look at it, where do the bikes stack up on the grid? And the Yamaha's probably the bike that a lot of riders don't want to be on right now. And they've got a new package for this season. They've got super concessions available for this season as well. It looks like at the Portimao test in a couple of weeks, that's when they'll start to bring in some of those parts. Engine upgrades looks like the key for that bike, but you still need to be able to use those engine upgrades, and they've got 2 days in Portimao to get ready, and then into the race weekend. We'll see how it goes. During the course of winter testing, Jonathan Ray made a big step with that bike. He looked a lot more comfortable, he looked a lot happier. The changes inside the pit box for Ray clearly helped as well. I think that's probably the one thing that for Yamaha, they would have loved to have been able to see him come through into this weekend, start the season with a bit of consistency, and then move on. As it is, he's gone for this weekend. The pressure falls on Andrea Locatelli because we know this is Locke's best track of the season. This is where he could have won a race last year. He needs to be able to live up to that expectation again this weekend.
Yes, as it was, he was able to deliver 2 second places in race 1, the Superpole race, and had ambitions to take the race victory in race 2. Just came to grief in the very closing stages, but inside the podium positions in 3 of those races until that crash in race 2. Quick mention of the fact that we've got 4 rookies on the grid this season. Montella, Vickers, Sofoglu and Zaidi. We've already seen Montella stepping up from the Supersport class this season. Doesn't he love this track? That's an opportunity for him to make an immediate impression on his debut this weekend, although he said, don't expect as much as you got from Nicolo Bulliger last season. It's going to be a bit of a tougher time for him as he acclimatises to this level of racing. Ryan Vickers, we've already seen coming in on the Moto Corsa bike. of course, that was taken to such success by Axel Bassani. Michael Ruben Rinaldi on that bike last season had a nightmare. He's dropped down now to Supersport. So Ryan Vickers it is who comes in to replace him. Zaidi joining Taz McKenzie on the MIE Honda. That bike hasn't really yielded points in recent seasons, but there was a little bit of cause for optimism for Honda at the back end of last year as they started to show some progress.
Yeah, Honda did what they've done a few times in the recent years. They made some progress, but it happened a little bit too late, and changes were already in place for the coming season, and that's why you've got a lot of new faces in the Honda pit box once again, particularly on Iker Lecuona's side of the box, and they're basically trying to just go all from stand and start again. So for Honda, progress needs to be made, and the bike has a lot of potential, but they haven't been able to release that potential, and that's why it's important to see Nagashima out there as well. And for Nagashima on the number 49 machine, that's the test team, and basically operated and ran by the Honda UK operation, and they have a big budget for this year for engine development, for track testing, and for wildcards as well. Tommy Bridewell looks like he's going to do Assen and Donington, and then we probably have Nagashima on the bike again at the tail end of the campaign. But for that manufacturer, that shows the emphasis that they're putting here. It's just about trying to find some way to get those results.
Yes, you say Tetsuya Nagashima, who appeared in Jerez at the back end of last year, so he'll be doing back-to-back rounds. Of course, performed well in Phillip Island on his last visit, so might be able to give them a run for their money. The advantage that he's got, of course, is these riders have all had the testing here in Phillip Island. Winter running has been somewhat restricted as a result of the weather conditions in Europe.
Yeah, it's been really tough. I went down to the Jerez and Portimao tests, and basically we had half a day's dry running at both of those tests, and everyone was out trying to understand what they were able to do to be able to just get any sort of miles under their belt. And particularly for the riders changing teams, whether it was the likes of Scott Redding or anyone else, it became really difficult to be able to get an understanding of the bike.
So we're heading up towards the 10-minute mark in free practice 1. The first lap times coming in. Alvaro Bautista leads the way with a 1 minute 29.680. Alex and Sam Lowes, and then Dominic Egerter. All of the bikes but one at the moment out on the circuit. In fact, I can tell you that the last man out, Axel Bassani, is now making his way down pit lane as well. So all riders out and circulating. We'll give you more on the rundown of those positions and times of the 23 competing. But first, let's introduce you for the first time this season to pit reporter Anthony Nelson.
First and potentially the last, let's say, Alex, this season. But here we are in Phillip Island, free practice 1. I'm here with Christian Goncher. Christian, new year, new bike. Nice little bonus to number 1 on the front of it as well. I'm sure adds to the motivation. But since the first session, a lot of viewers are tuning in for the first time. Tell us, this M1000RR that you brought here, the M1000RR, the new bike, what is new on this bike for 2025?
Well, I'm very glad that we now finally can start racing here on Friday at Phillip Island, because for all of us in the paddock, the winter test season was a bit difficult due to rainy conditions, patchy conditions, sometimes even injuries for us or some other brands. So we are glad that the bike model M1000 model year 25 is now here, back on grid, back on racing, to get some proper feedback after a nice FP1. Hopefully no wind conditions, no rain, and the riders are fully prepared. The team had a big job in the last days to do. Like always, preparation for the first race weekend is tough, so big team effort to get everything sorted, the bikes prepared. Riders are always on 100% ready to go, so I'm looking forward to see the number 1 and the number 60 doing some laps.
So this year, obviously, new engine in the bike, got the new aero package, and we've got the big change, or another big change that's been spoken about, is obviously the chassis. No super concessions for this year. That's change of plan over the winter. Tell us a bit about this whole process in the last couple of months, please.
Well, yes, it changed a bit the plan for the season, but at the end, now we are prepared. At the beginning of the winter test season, we were starting for sure with the old concession chassis, as agreed in the regulation at this time. But times are changing, regulations are changing, and must be fine-tuned in the interest of the championship. So we are glad to see now the fully 25 bike package here on grid. And the only problem for sure is that we miss a bit of preparation time and testing time. This will make the job a little bit more difficult for us, for the technicians, for the engineers, and also for the riders to adapt perfectly. But now we are here just looking forward and focus on what is going on. So nothing to complain about the past, just look forward and give the gas.
And Christian, what about a question? Because you were talking about the chassis as well just now, but something that struck me in the off-season, when you were talking about the rest of the grid, you were very focused as well on the new BMotorsports chassis in particular. It was interesting. I know it's a rival manufacturer, but I'd like to ask you as well what you found interesting about that.
Well, simply the fact that Kawasaki did the move with BMotor. It's a wonderful looking bike, and from the technological point of view, it's simply interesting because you could change a lot. They did. So I'm a passionate racing engineer. I see different solutions, and it's not about left, right, up, down, wrong or right. It's just about being different, and it's a smart move. I appreciate, and to get the competition in this paddock bigger is always good. To have new brands on the grid is good for the customers, for the people hanging around here. So from technical point of view, for sure, I will not exactly say what I look for on the most, but it's a nice bike, and you can always learn everywhere, every day.
We'll have to keep our eyes peeled on the TV then. Thank you very much, Christian. Enjoy the weekend.
All right, thanks a lot.
It was worth a try, Anthony. Steve, just your thoughts on the BMotor situation, joining up with Kawasaki this season, new team, new bike, new colours, and so on.
Yeah, everyone was excited at the post-Jerez round test last season to see the bike for the first time, and I think it looks amazing. Everyone has been down just taking a little glimpse at different parts on the bike. The trellis frame is obviously a bit of a novelty, and for the manufacturer to come in, they've got a good engine in the Kawasaki, and we'll wait and see what they do with that engine development going forward. But certainly the project came together as a little bit of a surprise for everyone, because you've got Kawasaki in Japan developing the engine. They've still got their Kawasaki World Superbike team with Manuel Pachetti's squad, so there's a motivation from the boys in green to make sure that they're able to beat BMotor as well. So you have two manufacturers sharing a lot of their platform together, and for BMotor, whether it's with the aerodynamics with the wings and the chassis and lots of other parts, it gives the Provec racing team a lot to work with as well. They've been using the same basic architecture of a bike for the best part of 12, 13, 14 years. So for them now, they've got a whole new project to get their teeth into, and they're having to just learn it piece by piece. I think coming to this weekend, even though they did a lot of testing last year with the bike, it's never the same as bringing your race riders and getting them onto the bike. They needed as much track time as possible over the winter. So I think coming to round one, it might be where it's a little bit under quick drag now compared to where they would have wanted it to be, but it's still a very good package. You speak to Axel Bassani in particular, he raves about the bike. On the edge of the tyre, he's got a lot more confidence now. I think any change was going to be good for Bassani, because last year was so tough for him, such a disappointing season. Now he's jumped onto this bike, he's felt a lot more comfortable with it. Alex Lowe's on the other side of the pit box has been trying to get it into the window for him, and I think it's been interesting to listen to both of their feedbacks, because for Lowe's it's been pretty clear that you can make the BMotor work quite well, but it probably needs him to make some more changes to it to feel that little bit more comfortable and then be ready to really push on it. But there's a lot of potential in that package.
Steve, potential, there's no doubt about that. The question is, reading the rooms and without putting numbers on it or whatever, what do you think is achievable in the first season? Because much as you touched on, there was development work. We were hearing stories about on-track development work already in the early stages of last year in the spring. But the testing has been interrupted. Obviously, it's a new situation, so for both riders, they've got to learn and acclimatise to the bike as well, and the team's got to understand what the potential of the bike is. So is this something where it's going to be a bit of a slow burner at first, and then we can see maybe it's got a higher ceiling than the Kawasaki package had, and in the years to come it will develop being a more modern bike? Or is this one where they could hit the ground running and be challenging right from the word go?
I think it depends on how you view hitting the ground running, because we know that this is Alex Lowe's best track of the year. He's so good around this place, but the problem is when you look at the top speeds, the Kawasaki at Garrett Gerloff has had 5, 6, 7 kilometers an hour on the BMotor as they've tried to understand how to get the most out of this package. And part of that comes down to how good the Kawasaki is whenever you're not on full lean angle, but you're on that half lean accelerating out of corners. So turn 12 here, the last corner, the Kawasaki's always been very strong coming through there, sets up well down the straight. For the BMotor, it doesn't seem like it's got quite that grip as you're on the edge of that tyre and accelerating out of corners. So maybe that's a factor for losing a little bit of top speed. Maybe the wings and the aero, you're still trying to understand that as well. I think that coming to this weekend, if I'm the BMoto team, if I'm Pro Vec Racing, I'm looking at it and saying, if Alex Lowe's, guy that won twice here last year in the Kawasaki, if he's able to come away with 3 top 6, top 7 finishes, that's actually really good. I think if he qualifies on the second row of the grid, it's a really good effort. Gives them something to build on. I think that when you look at Garrett Gerloff on the Kawasaki, even though we know how good the Kawasaki was here last year for Lowe's, for Gerloff's target for the Kawasaki World Superbikes team, that target probably shifts from being right, Lowe's challenged for 3rd in the World Championship last year. He won races, had podiums, he did this, that, and the other. For Garrett Gerloff, if he finishes in that 7th, 8th, 9th position, he's actually had a really good weekend as well. And he needs to find that consistency. BMoto probably need to find a little bit more performance. But I think that when you look at both of those projects together, I think if Lowe's can come away with top 7s, good effort. If Gerloff comes away with those top 10s, good effort from him. If Bassani qualifies on the front 3 rows of the grid, that gives you the confidence for him that he's made a step forward, because last year there was too often where there was 3 or 4 rows between him and Alex Lowe's, and you can't have your teammate that far ahead of you in the Super Pole session.
Toprak Razgatlioglu already completing his first stint back in the pit box, put in 5 laps in this free practice 1 session so far, best part of half an hour still remaining. Nicolo Bulliger leads the way at 1 minute 29.078. New bike as far as BMW are concerned this season, and that comes with its disadvantages. All of the perks they had, having been a struggling team, you know, they were 4th of the 5 manufacturers before Toprak Razgatlioglu joined. Suddenly they've lost all of those bonuses and goodies. Does Toprak Razgatlioglu still start this season as the favourite? Is the BMW still good enough for him to deliver the same kind of performance as last year? And have they been pegged back enough that we will now see a more equal fight between him, Bautista and Nicolo Bulliger?
I think we'll see a more equal fight because Ducati has the extra revs, and for the BMW they've lost some of those chassis parts, but the biggest super concession they had last year was putting Toprak on the bike. They still have him. The changes to the bike are going to take a little bit of time to maximise. Toprak doesn't really enjoy this track as much as other places, so this isn't the ideal opening round of the year for Razgatlioglu. The injuries, the lack of running, it's all going to hold him back. There's some things with the new bike that are really good. The bigger wings, Toprak is a big fan of. He says it really helps him a lot compared to last year's aero package, but they just need to figure out how to get the most they can out of that chassis.
See Nicolo Bulliger going faster and faster in the early stages of this free practice 1. He was the fastest man out there in the official test earlier on this week. Bulliger's being pegged as many people's favourites ahead of this opening round for the championship this season. I think they've looked into Toprak's physical situation with that injury, the situation for BMW, and obviously potentially losing out a little bit, as we've said, in the early stages of this season. And they've looked at how well Nicolo Bulliger finished last season, the final 2 rounds, and said that Bulliger could well be the man to beat. I certainly think he's at this stage the man you'd expect to give the closest fight to Toprak.
He's the man to beat this weekend, but make no mistake, Toprak is the man to beat, because if you take away that Magny-Cours crash last year, Toprak had won those 13 races in a row. If he doesn't crash in Magny, he's your odds-on favourite to win every other race for the rest of the season. You don't close up that gap overnight, and even with the changes for the BMW losing those parts, he still has that edge over the course of a full season. And for Bulliger, it becomes important to win those head-to-head battles. In a bar-to-bar scrap, is he going to beat Toprak? And everyone will look at Estoril last year and point to that as being a big moment for him, and Jerez as well. But for Bulliger, now that we're into the season and you start from afresh, he needs to show he can do that right from the get-go.
Anthony Nelson, if you're still ready for us, what have you got?
I am still ready for you, Alex, and I am standing here now after a little bit wait, just going to wait a second for Alex Lowe's actually to leave the pit lane, and because I am next to the BMoto by Kawasaki Racing Team WSBK pit box, and I'm standing here with team principal Jim Roden. Jim, absolutely new project for everybody here involved, quite an exciting time for the team, I can imagine. Again, because there's nothing. It's always noisy down here pit line. As I said, new project, exciting time for the team coming into WSBK.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, it always it's very new. Everything, honestly, is quite challenging because people maybe don't see how many things change inside. It's a very challenging project because the target we have is so big. and the time to build a new bike, create it, and make homologation, make production has been so tight. But okay, we did it. Now we are here, and now we really need to start the real race job, which is take this base bike and then make it as much competitive as possible.
Kim, obviously, Kawasaki engine, Bimotor chassis. What in particular is special about this new bike?
Everything. I cannot start from each detail. Of course, it's the base engine. The core of the bike is a Kawasaki engine, but all the rest is different, and it's impossible to start even in 10 minutes to input each detail we change. So okay, better the fans show the development, check the pictures, check the video, and then themselves will understand that this is completely different bike.
Well, the one that a lot of people are focused on, and the one I know that a lot of rival manufacturers are focused on as well, is the chassis in particular. A split chassis on this Bimotor. That is something which is quite new inside the paddock.
Yeah, it's a new way to, let's say, it's a new make to make a new brand, new business, open new markets with a little bit more premium bikes in this style of production, more like handmade for the fans, willing some exclusive bikes to ride, and okay, it's nice. Very nice idea Kawasaki had, and okay, we need to make it work from a racing point of view, and all about business is from the motor side and Kawasaki.
Any target you'd be satisfied this weekend?
What?
A target for this weekend?
Wishing target or realistic target?
Both.
Okay, let's see. I think fighting for the podium in each race and stay there would be fantastic. Then the final end, it's depending on many things, but it's not easy track to start, so let's see.
Well, thank you very much for your time, and best of luck this weekend.
Thanks.
Riding on board then with Alvaro Bautista. He is currently third fastest, just on his outlap. Bautista, who won so many races with Ducati. In fact, he is, for the manufacturer, their most winning rider in the championship. 2019, he went on the rampage, all of those consecutive victories. He managed to take the world title ultimately on his return to Ducati after 2 seasons with Honda, and then retain it in 2023. But last year it was well, there was promise in the opening few rounds, wasn't there? A couple of race victories, one in Barcelona, the Superpole race in Assen as well. But then it wasn't until Aragon late in the season that we saw the best of Bautista once again, and that has probably been his best circuit over the course of his time with Ducati. This has always been a good one for him as well, but the key for Bautista is going to be that single lap pace, because he's been giving up rows on the grid to his championship rivals last season.
Similar to what we said about Bassani, you can't qualify that far behind your teammate and get away with it in World SBK, and that's the big challenge for him. This is interesting. Down into the Honda test team pit box, you can see Chris Pike there, Jonathan Ray's crew chief in the early days of Ray's career at Tenkate Honda. There's a lot of experience down there as well. You saw Johnny Ayres came into the pit box as well, long time HRC MotoGP mechanic, and then KTM for the last few years as well. So they've got a good group with that test team to be able to build on. And at the end of the day for them, Nagashima's 17th fastest right now, and putting in pretty solid laps really compared to the likes of Iker Lecuona at this stage, and that's the target for them. Try and get a scalp of beating some of the regular Honda riders.
Reality for Iker Lecuona is he is carrying an injury sustained in pre-season, and I think there were some question marks as to whether he would be able to complete this weekend, and those question marks won't have gone away on the evidence of what we've seen so far. He's back out on track now, but well off the pace on that last lap. So I suspect there's probably still some concern about the physical fitness there for Iker Lecuona. Unfortunately
for Iker, there's just question marks about Iker, and he's a very talented rider. He's fast, but he's inconsistent, and he has those crashes. Some of that obviously comes down to the inconsistencies and the fickleness of the Honda, but after 3 years, it's about trying to get that real insight into where he is, where Xavi Vierge is, because there's a lot of riders up for contract renewal at the end of this season, and a lot of MotoGP riders that will be on the market. The Honda contract here is always a decent number for the riders, so a lot of managers are going to be knocking on the doors down there.
I did say at the top of the programme that this is a year of stability, but next season could well be a year of change, because things do seem to be aligning, and as you said, with GP as well.
Yeah, exactly, and it's where obviously every dynamo around the World SBK paddock falls after Toprak, and is Toprak going to be in the Superbike paddock? Is he going to go to MotoGP? There was a big rumour that the changes in structure at Yamaha and MotoGP might lead to him getting an opportunity to be on the Pramac Yamaha bike next season. Everything that's going on with KTM then has changed the lay of the land over in MotoGP, and for Toprak, he's been pushed down a little bit. There's other riders to find out their future, and then our superstar gets to find out what he's going to do next season. He could well stay at BMW. He might change manufacturers here. He might look for a new challenge again. I think for Razgatlioglu, it's obviously up to him what he decides he wants to do, and that will then have the impact on everyone else in the paddock here.
Toprak has certainly said consistently through his World SBK career he enjoys this paddock. Think about his comments in the documentary on worldsbk.com as well about how he enjoyed the family atmosphere of everyone coming to congratulate him after his world title for BMW. All of the greats, you know, Ray, Bautista, all of those people coming to stop and congratulate him on his success. He knows that it will be a different atmosphere if he does go to MotoGP, and yet the conversation started to shift a little bit over the last year or so, where clearly Toprak realises it's now or never.
As Toprak's English improved over the last 5 or 6 years, so is his confidence level. And for Razgatlioglu, it's been about, instead of being that superbike rider, it's been about being the best rider he can be. And I think it's one of those situations where he's seen what could happen in the future for him, and I think he's been keen to be able to try and explore that as well.
Toprak Razgatlioglu then coming round. 18 minutes to go in free practice 1. Nicolo Bulliger it is who leads the way. Yeah,
you saw Ian One at the top of the shot there as well, shaking his fist, so it'll be interesting to see what's happened there in that group. I thought Ian One was actually up at the front of that group initially because he came through on Toprak, but a little bit of frustration for him there. Toprak as well, we saw take his hand off the left bar as well, coming down in towards turn 7, so we'll wait and see if there was a little bit of needle between the two.
Riders making their way back into the pits. Nico Bulliger, Dominic Egerter as well. We haven't talked much about Egerter in this session so far. He's running up in 8th, and not much of a gap either to Andrea Locatelli, who's currently the top Yamaha, sitting in P4. Razgatlioglu just dropping further back down to P10. I don't think there's any undue concern for any of the riders about their times necessarily in this session. They've had a lot of running through the test at the start of this week as well. This is just about getting ready to go, and the real business, of course, is tomorrow at 1 p.m. local time for the Superpole session. Just watching the timesheets, and Tito Rabat is making his way around the circuit. Now, Tito, I think, did go out but came straight back in and has been routed to the pit box since then. So a lot of this session lost for Tito Rabat, who makes his move this season to Moto X, where he's joined by Bahattin Safoglu. And Tito Rabat, it'll be good to see him get some laps under his belt here, having lost much of the session already thus far. So we watch Michael van der Mark heading in towards turn 1. Van der Mark, the perfect foil, we've said time and time again, to Toprak Razgatlioglu. They were together at Yamaha, enjoyed their time as teammates, and good to see van der Mark back up at the front last season as well. Some memorable battles in Portimao, but particularly the race victory, of course, after 2 years of real injuries. You know, 3 severe injuries in a 2-year spell for van der Mark. Got back to where he was when he first started with BMW, 6th in the championship. But the opportunity this time, if he gets a clean bill of health, which we sincerely hope over the course of this season, is to kick on further still. We know the potential is there because Toprak's demonstrated.
Yeah, we always look at that second rider on each of the manufacturers, and for van der Mark, even though he's a former Supersport World Champion, a race winner here in World SBK, finished top 3 in the world on the Yamaha as well, he's there to be Toprak's backup. Toprak won the championship. Van der Mark was happy with him, and or Toprak was happy with Van der Mark as his teammate. And it's, that's Toprak down. Just tucks the front through turn 4.
So Toprak Razgatlioglu coming down at Miller Corner in free practice 1, 15 minutes to go. Thankfully for him, the slowest corner on the circuit, just about 60 kilometres per hour through there, and it doesn't look like too much for him to be concerned about. He is immediately straight back on the bike, but any time you have a spill, we said it during the testing as well, the immediate concern is for the pre-existing injury.
Yeah, exactly, and for Toprak, it's he's just after setting his fastest lap of the session, and coming through turn 4 there, Miller Corner, you could just see the front just tucked underneath him. and you go down the slowest corner on the track, no real damage done. You can see the wings are still intact, so not really an awful lot of force going through the bike for that crash. But for Toprak, it's another reminder of what can happen, and it's so easy to have a small crash here. It's a lot easier to have a big crash, as we've seen. And for Toprak, you can see through 4, probably just as he's cracked open the gas there, it's just folded underneath him and just walks away from it. What was interesting there as well, you saw that he didn't make an effort to try and lift the bike on his own. He called the marshals over straight away. So after that big crash on Monday, Toprak said everything hurts, and he's obviously riding hurt this weekend, but he didn't want to put any undue strain as well, just to lift up that bike.
Yeah, it's so rare, isn't it, that we see errors from Toprak Razgatlioglu. You know, when in Manicourt last season, we were saying, goodness me, you can hardly count the number of crashes he has had. But this season so far has really started on the back foot.
But what we've seen over the years, particularly last year, Toprak, whenever he was learning that BMW, had some big crashes in testing, and then when we got to round 1, he was able to be ready for the start of the season. He's had so little running over the course of this winter, a half day in Portimao, and then the running here earlier this week. So for Toprak, it's been really tough.
And Razgatlioglu then making his way back in and deep in discussions now with his crew chief. Really pick up too much of what that discussion is between them at present. Razgatlioglu coming to grief, certainly the biggest story of this free practice one thus far.
Yeah, and you can see on that right hand for Toprak, it's the index finger that was the finger that he damaged, and you can see that little bit of a movement on the front there just as you're getting ready to put the bike on its side into Miller Corner, and a lot of the time all it takes is a small moment to just unsettle the bike. That's probably just where the wind starts to hit you as well. You've just gone past where the tyre barrier is, where there's a little bit of protection from that wind that's coming straight across at that point. Maybe a factor for him. Ryan Vickers has gone down at MG Corner as well, so everyone's starting to push on now into their second exits, into the end of this session, and 2 slow speed crashes, but 2 reminders for those riders about just what can happen around this place.
Let's see if we pick up the incident. Here it is on the Moto Corsa bike. Ryan Vickers, his the first weekend of his rookie campaign.
A little bit wider than where you want to be going through MG, and if you're that little bit wide and you're still trying to carry the speed, you can have a crash like that. We see a lot of crashes at MG. It's an easy place. It's downhill on the entry, and very easy to have a crash through that corner. So Vickers has just had that, but no damage done to him. A little bit of damage done to the bike. It looks like that wing on the right hand side is a little bit damaged maybe, but no, it's actually okay. It's just the angles you can see from the flags on it actually as much as anything else. But for Vickers, it's not really anything worth writing home about that crash for him. He'll be happy just to get himself back to the pit box. They'll get that bike ready to do one more exit.
Solid enough start to this session for him. 7,000ths of a second down on Jari Montella, who's probably the most direct point of comparison, you'd have to say, for Vickers over the course of this round and this season, although Montella's out there just about to improve on his time. Let's take a look at the run then from Nicolo Bulliger. His first stint, a decent length, and some fast times towards the end of it as well.
7 of those laps within a quarter of a second of each other, and we know that you're going to have to make the tyre last for those 10 laps and be consistent, all down in the low 29s. That's what we saw last year in the races. So for Bulliger, he's straight down to business.
Yeah, just a reminder, if you are joining us, the 11-lap run is probably the right one to be doing, isn't it? Because that's the most you're going to be able to do on a single tyre this weekend, which will mandate effectively a pit stop in race 1 and race 2. Obviously, it's not going to affect the Super Pole race, but it does mean that every race becomes an all-out sprint, and that you'll have 5 Super Bowl races effectively in 3 over the course of this weekend.
Yeah, just in terms of the tyre wear that we've seen, there's been a few riders have suffered from a little bit of blistering, usually with that zero tyre, so the softer tyre, but no one really suffered during the course of the test. Riders were able to put a lot of laps and a lot of miles on the tyres, so for everyone it seems that it's going to be pretty comfortable in the races first, but obviously the decision made in advance this weekend that after everything that happened last year, it was an error on the side of caution, and for the teams and the riders, that then basically programs your week, because during the tests everyone was trying to do those shorter runs and just go as fast as you possibly can. Basically the exact opposite of a typical Phillip Island weekend, where you're trying to go as slow as you can to give yourself as much rubber for the last 3 laps as you can. And for all these riders now, it becomes basically all about those Super Pole stints, basically.
Just under 10 minutes to go in free practice 1. Anthony Nelson, what have you got for us?
Just a very quick update on the GRT Yamaha guys. I was stuck in front of the box a little while before Toprak's crash, and actually there was extensive work being done on Remy Gardner's bike then. He had the whole front fairing off the bike, and there was a lot of work done to the suspensions there. Aside from that, he's already gone back on track. I've been able to compare the swing arms that both riders, himself and Dominic Eggert, are using here. It's been a topic of discussion for Yamaha over these winter tests. Yamaha have brought a new swing arm that in particular Andrea Locatelli was using at the start of the winter tests, and for what I've been able to see, Remy Gardner, as he was during the test here in Phillip Island, is using it, whereas Dominic Eggert seems to be preferring the old model that they were using last year. So a bit of a difference of opinions amongst the 3 Yamaha riders that we have here, the 3, let's say, riders contracted to Yamaha that are here in Phillip Island.
Yes, that gives you rather a tongue twister, doesn't it? The official Yamaha riders that we've got, the official teams, GRT. 8.5 minutes to go in free practice 1. We're just watching Scott Redding here, and this has not been the start to his time back on a Ducati that he might have hoped for in FP1 at least. Down in 19th position at the moment.
Yeah, Scott had a few problems during the test as well. Looks like a technical issue there for him at this stage, and just trying to cruise around Stoner Corner, and got himself back into the pits. 19th fastest at the moment for Scott. He's only done 9 laps at this stage. Just to compare that, Jari Montala out on track at the moment, he's done double that mileage. So for the likes of Redding, it's about trying to get that time on the bike. And certainly whenever he's in a group, he's going to be fine this weekend. But you're still trying to get the bike working as you need. The team are still trying to understand it fully. And for Scott, it's going to be about trying to keep that cool head all the way through this weekend. Yeah,
and he is generally a good qualifier, so he can get into the group that he needs to be in. But at the moment, the reading of free practice 1 purely on the times, he's not going to be enjoying sitting behind Montella and Vickers and on the timesheets thus far. It's not what Redding would have been hoping for in FP1.
No, far from it. And for Scott, he needed to make sure that he was able to come into this weekend with that bit of confidence that he needed and be able to build into it. But at the end of the day, you get what you get during the course of a race weekend. It's only free practice 1, so there's still plenty of time left in the weekend.
Yes, Iker Lekwona continuing on for the moment, so it's not been he's not restricted his running or anything like that, but he's still behind Nagashima in the timesheets by about 0.4 of a second. So Iker Lekwona we catch up with here, has missed 2 Australian rounds, hasn't he, through injury previously, and comes here again a little bit under the weather as far as the arm is concerned. Iker Lekwona just making his way around the circuit, but showing no real improvement at the moment.
Yeah, you can see though the bike moving around an awful lot under him, and just have a look at those front suspension especially. You can see the gold Olins on the Honda, and that's a big change for them this year from the Showa suspension they'd used in the past. The biggest changes though are inside the pit box. Iker keeps his crew chief, but a lot of other personnel in his side of the garage have changed. This is Xavi Vierge. He's got a new crew chief for this weekend, for this season, and it's one of those situations for him where he's had to make that change and bring in Sasaki from previously Suzuki MotoGP and lots of experience gives him a new option for this year. Speaking to the mechanics and crew members, they've been really happy with the change for Xavi. It's been really structured all the way through the winter, and Sasaki's been able to give that team just a really good working plan for each session and each day of testing.
Final sprint in free practice 1. Nicolo Bulliger still in his pit box for the moment, leads the way on a 1 minute 28.922. Andrea Iannone just completing his installation lap ahead of his final stint, 0.4 of a second down. Bautista Petrucci, Locatelli and Razgat Lioglu all still yet to start their final stints, although as you can see Toprak making his way back out onto track now, so no undue concern after that incident earlier in the session.
Yeah, loses 7 minutes from that crash, but for Razgat Lioglu, he just sees Michael van der Mark move into the top 10 at the times now with a personal best for Mikey.
Yeah, Yes, Rascati making his way out onto the circuit then to join him. As you said, new personal best. Gerloff was looking good for a new personal best as well, although he lost a bit of ground in the final sector, so remains down in 12th. Alex Lowe's up and running with a flying lap at the start of what is most riders' final stints now. Dominic Egerter also out there and improving. So it looks like we might see a few improved times in the final 5 minutes as ever.
Yeah, just for Lowe's as well, within a couple of tenths of his best last time around, trying to just find that consistency as well. You can see for Alvaro Bautista, fresh out of the pits there, that's why he's hung off the side of the racetrack there, just to let the other riders come through the southern loop. And the two motorbikes out there on track right now together. Axel Bassani inside the top half of the field in 11th position, just being deposed a spot by Michael van der Mark, and then Alex Lowe's on a good lap now as well. Should improve his time, might pick up a couple of positions.
Might be a good idea for these two to work together in Super Bowl, certainly for Bassani's side of things. I wonder if there's an opportunity for them to buddy up a little bit, because we do see it work really well for BMW at times, where Michael van der Mark can get a better result than he's generally been able to. He's not the best of qualifiers. They've been working together. Axel Bassani's out there with Alex Lowe's at the moment. Looks like both will set new personal bests. Lowe's goes to a 1 minute 29.837, 9 tenths down on Bulliger for P5, and Axel Bassani's personal best puts him just over a second behind top spot. There's a lot of riders separated by a very small margin. Lowe's 9 tenths down in P5, Bassani 1.1 down, P9.
Yeah, and you can see there for Lowe's, he was coming around that last corner as well. The little movements from the rear, just as he tips into Stoner corner there. But for Alex Lowe's, the biggest issue he has right now for him, he's clocking in around 306, 307 consistently on the straight in terms of his top speed. The likes of Andrea Iannone tops that chart for this session. With a slipstream, he was getting 324. So a massive difference in terms of straight line speed between the Bermuda and what we've been able to see from the likes of Iannone and the other Ducatis.
Yes, we've seen fast measurements through the speed trap last season here for Honda in particular. So there are some manufacturers going a little bit better in a straight line than others, but Andrea Iannone, as you say at the moment, that top speed in this FP1.
The max for Lowe's and Bassani, 309 and 310. So that's what they've been able to get. You'd imagine at some point during the session they've had a bit of a toe into turn one. So they're giving up round about 10k on average to the riders around them. So you can't really afford that around Phillip Island, because it's just one of the places where you can make that easier move. And if you don't have that top speed, you then have to find some way to be faster in other areas of the track. We know Lowe's is very good from turn 6 up to Lukey Heights, but you're putting a lot of pressure on to try and make your lap time if you're giving up that top speed.
Yeah, admittedly, 830 odd metres start-finish straight here, and not a long back straight, so it's not the worst venue. But if we do see that at some other tracks this season, think about the long straights that we go to elsewhere on the calendar, and places like Aragon, for example, that could really be a deficit. So it is something to keep an eye on over the course of the coming rounds.
It is something that's going to improve for them, though, as they learn and understand that bike a little bit more, how to set the bike up and how to use the electronics. That will give them a little bit of improvement as the season goes.
Is there an element of getting out of the final corner then that's also having an impact on that measurement?
It does make a big difference here, because turn 12 is such a long corner. You've got turn 11 and 12 basically where you're on that side of the tyre. You can see here for Tommy Agutter, he's coming through that section. Look at how long he's on the side of the tyre through here. You never get upright, so you're one continuous radius corner all the way around, and then your fourth gear sticking through the box then as you exit the corner, fifth gear, sixth as you come across the line. It's so fast that if you're not able to have that edge grip and drive out of the corner, it costs you those couple of kilometres an hour as well.
It's crossing the line for a new personal best, 1.1 down on P1. It's been a solid session, this one, for Dominic Egerter, who had a very, very tough 2024. A few missed rounds due to injury for him as well. And when he was there, he was in the top 10 more often than not. We know he goes well here in Phillip Island, had that startling Super Bowl result on his debut in World SBK, didn't he? So let's hope we see Dominic Egerter back to his best this season, because previously he and Remy Gardner generally fairly well matched, and Gardner had the advantage last season with Egerter struggling with that injury.
Yeah, and certainly for Domi, there's a lot of pressure on him this season to make sure he's able to stay on the grid next year, because everyone is basically having to get their results this season, and for Domi, definitely one of those situations where the injuries and all the problems he's had since he jumped onto a superbike, it's forgotten about if you're not getting the results. And that's the target for him this season.
And the reality is, when you talk about next season, when we come to June, we're already going to be thinking about what have you done in the first 3 or 4 rounds of this season, because he's not got necessarily, and most riders haven't got the whole season to deliver. They've got 4 rounds to show what they can do.
Well, for the 4th round is Cremona, and that's where this man, Toprak Razgatlioglu, he'll expect to have his future pretty much decided by then. And for everyone else, then it starts to fall into place. So probably for that first half of the season, for a lot of riders, that's when they'll want to have that future. With his improved lap time there as well, so he always goes well here, qualified here in the front row of the grid on his debut, challenge at the front that weekend as well, so important for him to be able to start the season strong.
Yeah, last season's so-called silly season wasn't very silly at all, was it? But this season could be much more lively midway through the year. Checkered flag falls on free practice 1, then final lap times coming in here. Nicolo Bulliger didn't come out for a final stint in the final 5 minutes. A few riders just coming out to do their practice start, Bulliger included. Yonone did, but he was just a fraction down on his fastest time, 1 minute 29.344 there as he takes the checkered flag. His previous best of 129.289. So Nicolo Bulliger, the only rider into the 1 minute 28. We see Alvaro Bautista coming across the line. He's already 7/10 down after 3 completed sectors. So 6/10 back from Bulliger. And it is a strong start for Ducati. I don't think that's any surprise. We said at the top of the programme it's still the bike to beat, and particularly here in Phillip Island where they have a great record. But your top 4, Bulliger, Yonone, Bautista, and then Danilo Petrucci just slotting in there late on as well. Yeah,
nice to be able to see though 2 Yamahas up there with Locatelli in 8th, Aguilar in 5th, the Bimota's up there with 2 bikes inside the top 10, but the Ducati is the bike to beat. Just a little bit further down the order, at the back of the field, important to keep an eye on Zaidi's times. He missed out on the first day of running here at the Phillip Island test. He needs to make sure he's able to get within 105% of the fastest times through the course this weekend. He's not near it right now, so they need to build into this weekend for him, and certainly for the former Asian Championship rider, it's about trying to gain that experience, but he's having to do it on the fly, having been on the back foot after visa issues meant that he didn't arrive until late on Tuesday.
Yeah, the 105% time, with Bulliger's fastest being 128.922. The 105 time is 133.369, and Zaidi's time 137.039. So restricted performance there as we see Toprak Razgatlioglu making his way into the pit box, and of course this is going to be something the teams are going to want to do over the course of the weekend.
You could see there as well, just when the front was changed, Andy Carroll just pumping the brake as well, just to make sure everything's working okay. All those little things matter in the pit stop. We don't have a bike change like in MotoGP, so you've got a minimum time that you have to spend in pit lane. It means that you're able to comfortably make the changes to the tyres, or if you have to change the suspension if it's a wet to dry race, or vice versa. So everyone just getting themselves comfortable with that, because they know they're going to have to do it twice during the course of the races.
Yeah, I must admit, it brings something extra, doesn't it, when we have riders, the pit intervention time and possible penalties at the end, mistakes that sometimes happen. Jonathan Ray got caught out last season, lost a bunch of time, and then the split strategies where someone might stay out another couple of laps, a la Andrea Locatelli last season, to try and gain some ground with clear track in front of you. So it'll be a lively weekend at very least. It starts with free practice 1, and it is a Ducati 1-4. Nicolo Bulliger leads the way, the only man into the 1 minute 28. Yonone Bautista shaking his head after his final lap there, completes the session in 3rd, then Danilo Petrucci with his final lap 4th. Dominic Egerter ends up as the top Yamaha, while Toprak Razgatlioglu leads the time charts as far as BMW are concerned. Promising start for Bimota, Alex Lowe 7th. Axel Bassani in particular will be pleased to have finished his first competitive session of the season, less than 1/10 of a second down on teammate Alex Lowe's. Here is your stint summary then. Nicolo Bulliger with a long run there, 1 minute 28.922 set by him. 13 laps officially completed over the course of that session, so not as much running as some of the other riders. Andrea Iannone with 3 stints there, his fastest time coming at the end of the second. There were 2 times there, very similar to one another, and he matched it then with his final lap of the session as well. Alvaro Bautista's fastest time in his final stint on the first lap of 129.515. sector times then, and sector 1, Andrea Iannone fastest through there. It's all Ducati. The yellow Go 11 bike, the fastest through there. Less than a tenth though ahead of Bulliga and Bautista. Second sector, Toprak Razgatlioglu appears. Bulliga and Iannone leading the way through that one. And then Alvaro Bautista joins them again in sector 3. Final sector, fastest rider through there, Nicolo Bulliga. So 3 of the 4 sectors led by Bulliga. No surprises there, almost 4/10 of a second faster than anyone else as he takes first blood. The man who was fastest in testing at the start of the week is still fastest in free practice 1. Just under 4 hours now till we're back on track for FP2. Marginally better, I suppose, for those of you joining us from Europe. Race 1 and Race 2 will be starting at the same time over the next couple of days, so you can start to acclimatise.